Okay, we're going to go ahead and start our Tuesday, February 25th work session meeting. Please stand for Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, today we'll be talking about the street maintenance and safe route to school sales tax 2020 update report. Rob Ott, our Director of Public Works, will be presenting this evening. Hi there, Rob.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Just real quick, I guess, background on terms of funding sources for our overall pavement management for the community. There's really three sources that we have that go towards hiring contractors or paying our folks to repair our streets in our community. The first is the general fund. I think you all are pretty familiar with the overall general fund and how revenues are generated for that between property tax as well as sales tax. Second one is the gas tax. That's been around for a long time. It's a distribution that comes back to us through the state, and it's been here for a very long time. It's also been very flat, and I'll show you those numbers. The newest tax or revenue source that we have to address pavement condition inside the community is the sales tax that the community passed. But it has a sunset of 10 years. It was passed an election of November of 2016 and will end in 2026. So there is a lifespan to that revenue source. So just starting out with some basic facts. I thought I said three sources. Yeah, three sources. The general fund, maybe I confused you, Commissioner. The general fund obviously has property tax and sales tax that's paid into the general fund. As you know, of every $1 of property tax that comes in, the city of Manhattan gets roughly, let's see here, my eyesight, I'm sure it's not your eyesight, it's my eyesight. I can't read that. Here we go. You know, it's of every $1, roughly 11 cents of property tax actually comes to the city. And then you all, Bernie's briefed you on this numerous times, how that 11 cents is then split up between these various funds, between general fund, bond and interest, employee benefit, fire and equipment reserve, general fund, park and rec, KP&F, and an industrial revolution. General fund budget is roughly 31 million. The Public Works Street only, and that's everything the Public Works Street does, is roughly 2.5 million. So of the street budget, roughly 7.92% is of the general fund. So if you take that 11 cents, it's less than 1 penny of every dollar paid potentially goes into that Public Works street budget, if that helps you all out, okay? Some general facts. So if you think of our pavement in our community, if you think of it as like your house, you have a roof, you have siding that has paint on it, things that you have to maintain as an individual. Our roof, or the amount of siding that needs to be painted and maintained to a certain level that's acceptable, ours happens to be 4.1 million square yards. Okay, that's a lot of area. I actually went back and looked at some presentations just before I became the director in 2015. Our square yards is around 3.7 million square yards. So the community has grown in the last 5 years. Our number of square yards, our number of lane miles has gone up. I gave you some breakdowns. Asphalt and concrete are the two major types of surface that we have in the community. Concrete's roughly 2.3, and then we also have gravel and brick streets as well. What is not included in our inventory are the alleys. So whether the alley's concrete, asphalt, gravel, or a bunch of potholes that we're not sure what it is not in that inventory, okay? So that's one component that's been missing, and perhaps we'll eventually go out and evaluate all those. If you were to take this 4.1 million square yards, and I want to be real clear, this is not regrading and redoing the base. If you were just to tear off the shingles on your entire house and put new shingles up there, so labor and material only, not replacing the decking, not replacing the felt, you're just going to replace the roof shingles on your house. Our house, in terms of pavement value, is just over 300 million, okay? That's the value of the asset of what our pavement is. And we're trying to spend roughly $4 million a year to maintain that asset above a pavement condition index of 70, okay? So that's the monumental task that we have before us. This happens to be a map of the current pavement condition index. Because of the scale, and it's tough to read, and I know that, basically anything that's in purple is a segment that is less than 70. If it's green, the segment is greater than 70 and is in a fair or better condition. If it's pink, a portion of that segment, we typically look at the type of distress, the density of the distress, and the frequency. So we look at those components of the deficiency that's in that pavement segment, and we had it evaluated. If you remember, we had that done, I believe it was in late of 2017, early 2018, and then we've updated segments that we've repaired. So if a segment had a lower PCI, we made repairs in either 2018 or 2019, we changed that pavement condition index. And that's what that map is here, it's a reflection. If you're really super bored and you really want to get into the data, this is the spreadsheet that has every segment in the entire community. There are over 3,391 segments in the community, okay? And that's kind of how we do some of the calculations in terms of width, length, and then what is the condition. We give that segment a grade, kind of like 0 to 100, just like we're all in school. 70 being our goal to try and keep that average or above. Let's see here. Keep going here. Okay, just some more facts for you all. So the majority of the miles, or the majority of the square yards, is in our residential. Roughly 80% of our pavement is in residential, and then collectors and arterials. Now the reverse is true though, for how many people drive on those roads. We all know that Anderson Avenue or Kimball, it can have anywhere between 22 to 25,000 cars per day. And you'll see here in a few minutes, that's also kind of what I get my ear bent in terms of potholes on the way to work. I get complaints first about the arterials and collectors. But however, our condition, you'll see here in a minute, our local streets are declining. In terms of lane miles, so this happens to be centerline miles, so that's 228 centerline miles. That's basically from A to B. If I were to take the length times the number of lanes in each of those segments, our total lane miles now is around 491. And again, we've grown a little bit since 2015. The majority of the miles are in our local and residential area, and so forth. So the next chart here happens to be pavement condition index based on just average. So, and I'll explain the difference here in the next chart. Basically, we account each segment as the same. You know, if we have one segment's 100 and our segment's 50, we average 75. Okay, that's one way, that's how some communities do it. Another method in which you can do, I like to do a weighted PCI average. I like to show both just so that everyone kind of gets a feel for it. When you do a weighted PCI, what you do is you take the length, width, and times the pavement condition index, divide by the theoretical max. And that's how you get to these various numbers. And this chart here kind of shows the blue being just an average, and then the orange being actually that weighted average. Some takeaways you should get from here, again, the residential is getting really close to 70, and that's a concern because that's where the majority of our square yards is. That's where the majority of our lane miles are. As you would expect, and what I've been told and guidance I've been given in the past is try and maintain arterials and collectors at a higher standard. But we're gonna have to probably make a little bit of a switch here in the next few years and begin to address more residential. And I'll kind of show that to you in some more breakdowns. This chart here happens to be a breakdown in concrete versus asphalt in terms of how many square yards per type. And then I just typed in what that PCI average, what that weighted PCI was for just concrete. Again, the takeaway that I took from doing some of the data crunching this year is that our residential, when you look at our asphalt, we're gonna have to in the next few years probably be a little bit more aggressive and do more mill and overlay and get into some residential neighborhoods because that weighted average on the asphalt in residentials is dropping. Okay? And in fact, it's below 70. You can kind of see where our collectors are and arterials. One thing I do want to point out here in terms of our arterial streets, projects like North Campus Corridor are going to help us out. Kimball Avenue, some segments are below 70. So those projects that you all have committed to, and you know, obviously each phase will have to be approved, but those types of projects will address that pavement condition. You'll remember when you awarded College Avenue is another one. We're addressing some of the pavement conditions on College Avenue with the current phase that'll start here Monday, next week. So now this chart here, what I've done is I've taken all the pavement types and all the classifications and I've kind of combined them. Orange is concrete, blue is asphalt. And then what I did is I broke down how many square yards in each category are either above or below 70. So if you have the stripes, those are the square yards. This orange here, that's 666,142 square yards of pavement that is estimated to be below 70, okay? To kind of give you a feel for the task ahead in the community, if you were to replace and just repair all the concrete, so if you remember in my memo, I kind of gave you a price of what it costs to fix concrete streets by the square yard. It was roughly $62 a square yard. If you were to take that 666,000 square yards, what do you think that value is? It's roughly 43 million, okay? That's a 10-year program. We're trying to spend $4 million every year and repair streets. So that's kind of some of the challenges before us. And again, I just give you that as an example because remember, every day it rains, it freezes, it thaws. Well, not every day it freezes and thaws, but lately it freezes and thaws a lot. The stuff that is good only becomes worse and it deteriorates, just like your roof does. Okay, the same thing on the asphalt as well. This just happens to be another chart breaking down. There's probably too many colors and too many lines there for you all. If you have specific questions, I can jump into it. I just basically broke it down even into more detail. Again, the residential, the asphalt is something that we're going to have to address in the future. So what is the plan for 2020? I'll start kind of with the city crews. City crews use general funds, obviously for their salary. They do have dollars for concrete and asphalt. I should have written down before I got up here. I think last year we had over 20,000 potholes we patched. And I haven't looked at this year. So last year was a record number of year. Last year was also a very harsh winter. And we did more asphalt patching than I would have liked, but we had to. I mean, just things weren't passable out in the community. general fund dollars are used up, we do use special street and highway funds or the gas tax for materials. So dowel bars, rebar, concrete, asphalt as well. Some of the areas that they'll be working in this summer will be in the Sunset Zoo area. They already started today up in Holiday Drive. They need to finish up some things that we started last year up on Sunset by the high school. And then, as you know, they're still finishing up the Hayes Drive sinkhole there over by Walmart.
Rob, are you on Holiday Drive? The lower part of that is not, doesn't seem to be used.
Let me,
There's an upper part that is.
the segment that we marked is really, I'll go to a different map.
Well,
here in
you
a
can
minute.
answer it later too. I don't want to interrupt everything
No,
here
no,
to
it's
go to
okay.
another screen, but I do want to talk about it at some
I was gonna, it's honestly, it's the 250 feet just
west of the highway.
Tuttle Creek Boulevard.
Okay,
You know, that segment where you got a business there that's trying to survive. and
right.
The pavement's almost impassable.
Well, it is after you go by that business.
Yeah, we're not going that far west
Yeah.
with this phase. I don't disagree that the pavement's in bad condition.
It's
but in-
bad.
But in terms of usage.
Yeah.
And average daily traffic, we're not going that far west.
Enter at your own risk. But
There's a-
but
there's a-
after you get up, is it Mulligan or something, up in the north part there, the upper part, then it needs some repair.
There's some
Yeah.
repair there, but.
Okay.
But they have another way in off either road.
Exactly, that's what I'm thinking. Okay,
In terms of cubic yards paved each month, or I apologize, this is the per year slide. I've got, let's see, ever since 2014, what the production's been by our city crews in terms of placement of cubic yards of concrete. You can see generically or traditionally, our trend is we don't get a whole lot done in the winter months. Sorry that the projector's cutting off. I don't know why it's doing that. So January and February, March, those are tough times a year for us to get production and so forth. In 2017, we had a very mild winter. So you happen to see we got lots of production in 2017. I will tell you, in 2019, we did not meet our goals. And I think you all know why we didn't meet our goals. Harsh winter, plus all the flood response. Crews are out running pumps instead of repairing streets. We pumped down the city numerous times in the middle of the night. We ran crews 24 hours. I'm not going to make any excuses. That's a simple fact. We didn't meet production numbers. Did we have very high production on potholes? Yeah, we did. We really exceeded those numbers. But in terms of trying to get at that square yards of repair each and every year, we didn't meet our goal last year. Okay. Let's see, the next slide should be a per month average. Obviously, we got spring cleanup coming here first week in April, end of March. That's already scheduled for the community. And we've already kind of started. We're not quite into March, but we've already kind of started on holiday. Temperatures stay like they are. We'll continue to charge ahead. The mayor's in charge of the weather this summer. She's going to take care of all the
Take care
intense
of winter,
rains
too.
and even it out. And hopefully we'll have a good production year. And that's really the intent. Now, kind of switching funding sources. This happens to be the gas tax. If you'll remember last year, we repaired a good portion of Kimball Avenue all the way down to the base. We got into a base condition that was frankly muck between K113 and Kenmore. And we tore it all the way down and we rebuilt it. We got geotech, we got pavement recommendations based on the average daily traffic, the amount of trucks, and we rebuilt it the right way. We kind of need to do the same thing between Candlewood and K113 this summer. There is also an asphalt contract again. We'll see what revenues come in at, but that's the intent. with the special street and highway money. So that's the gas tax. We'll spend just over $1 million doing that. In terms of the sales tax, the new tax that has the 10-year sunset, we already have a concrete package that is out for bid, which is Plymouth, Gary, Denholm, and Cedar Crest. Once Brian sees those, let's say they bid this Wednesday? I'm sorry, next week Tuesday. After he sees that, we look at revenues. Well, then we'll look at an asphalt package. We're looking at Dickens and Claflin. And again, once we get that package, because we don't temp note, we're not bonding maintenance projects. That was part of our promise and our campaign as we sold it to the community, that we would not pay interest for temp notes or bonding projects for maintenance, that we would pay cash and pay as we go along. So that's kind of why we put out these packages, so that we can keep making sure that we don't go over budget and we have the revenues that we need to pay the contractors. Here's some other segments as well. Asphalt 10th, 9th, kind of the, I'd say the southeast quadrant of the ward districts. And then we also have a KDOT grant, which is a 50-50 split for concrete panel repair between the mall entrance and Juliet. And that will go to bid. That'll be a KDOT bid, and we'll have a cost share for that. We'll pay for 50%. Again, at least we're going to leverage some dollars back to the community. Future projects for 2021 that are kind of high on the list. Again, all depending on everything we get into this summer and this construction season, that we really need to try and target for next year. I have some 2-inch asphalt mill and overlay. They're listed for various streets, majority of them all being residential except for Stag Hill and Marlatt. All the rest are residential. Concrete streets, Cherry Hill is one that's going to probably require a little bit of design. We need to do some under drains, but that concrete condition's in bad shape. Kings Road is another one. I think Mary recently got a letter on that one. That, again, on our list. We don't believe that one will take any special design, but that one's on our list. And College Heights has been there for a long time too, so we shall see. You also notice that we have an additional package for Stag Hill in the Bellhaven area. Again, it's all going to be contingent upon how far we get with the current packages and the repairs that they're making in those neighborhoods now. Right now, they're up working in the Stag Hill area and the Bellhaven addition as well. So we'll see how far we get. We'll see where the revenues are. Then we'll package again and put out the bid for folks. The one probably big repair that we'll need to do, again, that's full depth. And a little bit of debate, this could be swapped with Sunset, but 17th, Sunset, and 11th Street, similar to Kimball, is probably a full depth asphalt repair, tear it down to the base. Sunset, you know, there's curb and gutter issues. There's not much curb left in order to carry the stormwater. So there's definitely some things that need to be repaired.
Rob, so
Yes.
how do you know with these residential ones, because I mean, the square footage, as you said, has increased, but unless I'm driving on some of those, I just have my creature of habit. I just go home, go to the same
Sure.
roads, but there's so many little ones. How do you know? Do you wait for somebody to call and tell you, or do
No,
you have your staff that?
Well, it's a combination. I'll say it's a combination of three things. One, I have the pavement condition index, so I can look at the maps, I can look at the numbers, and go, okay, this looks like a hot spot area. Jeff, so I'll use the Stag Hill area. Jeff and I, when we started putting together some of those initial budget numbers, he and I went out and drove every segment and said, boy, you know, it looks like this segment. Okay, the PCI says it is 60, but you know, it looks worse. It looks like we're going to replace 75% of this segment. This segment looks like maybe 25% or 50%. So we try to estimate these different neighborhoods and so forth. when we put the package together, like I was saying, we do kind of use all three things. We use, obviously, complaints. We do use the PCI maps and the data. And then I also meet with my staff. They're the ones that are out there repairing things. Just because a computer I use the computer initially
Right.
to get me started, but at the end of the day, a lot of times I do listen to the crews, just because I think, I'll use 17th, Sunset, and 11th as an example. And just because the computer tells me I should do a mill and overlay, my crews bent my ears and they're like, that's not realistic. You need to go out there and walk it and look at it and deal with how many times I've already patched it. And that's where some of those recommendations of full depth versus just a mill and overlay have come from.
Well, I'm glad you use all three, because there are some areas where residents may not be privy to how to send in a complaint. We would like to think everybody knows how to do that, but they just assume that we're gonna come and fix it.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that you're following all three points of contact to figure out which one needs it.
It's a balancing act. I'll tell you, I don't make everyone happy, that's for sure.
I know you don't. I get the
Everyone wants to be
emails.
first. Everybody wants it to be their turn next. But at the same time, we are trying hard to do entire neighborhoods. I know Brian got chewed out 2 summers ago by a gentleman that was mad that, well, that pavement's not that bad. Sir, we're not coming back for 20 years. We're either gonna fix it now, or it's not gonna happen. We're not doing this patch quill stuff anymore either. I mean, I think, Commissioner Butler, you've bent my ear on that. Let's repair it the right way. Let's get it down to the base, get the foundation, and do it correctly. So we've really abandoned that patch quill type methodology.
I think
If I
that's the
don't have
best,
to do it.
yeah. That's
I
the
will.
best way to do it. Thank you for that.
Yep. 2025, I'm gonna tell you right now, these are all in flux. Again, they're on our radar. You'll notice again, there's a lot of streets in that Northview area that are all asphalt. The Brooks, Butterfield, probably, there's a lot more up there that are asphalt. Venesta Drive area, there's Churchill, there's Venesta, Everett, Londonderry. There's quite a few streets up there in the Venesta Drive area, that asphalt. If I wait too long, it's gonna crumble, and then I get into full depth. So that's why I was kind of saying before, the data is telling me in probably the next 2-3 years, we're gonna have to be a little bit more aggressive on the asphalt side and do more square yards. Same thing with Highland Meadows, Stone Point, all those areas, believe it or not, I know they're the newer parts of Manhattan, were constructed almost 10 years ago. And that top surface of asphalt, it can be anywhere between 10 and 15 years before you need a mill and overlay. And some of those areas are reaching that point. On the concrete streets, Grandview Terrace is one that Jeff and I went out, the North Ehlers Road. I think Commissioner Morris, that kind of gets to some of the segments that you were talking about. Jeff and I went out and made some estimates as well. College Heights, the West Reeth neighborhood, so if you're north of Anderson and west of Reeth Avenue, there's a whole bunch of streets in there that are got a bad PCI. Again, I'd like to attack the entire area all at once. It's just gonna be tough dollar-wise to get there. Again, another kind of a Stag Hill area, Walters Drive, and then, honestly, these are all big price items. And again, Sunset may slide in front of 17th. Brian and I will arm wrestle. He'll probably win, but we'll probably debate 17th and Sunset the next couple of months because Sunset's in pretty bad shape. But it's going to require some design because I want to address some of the curb inlets and so forth. There's not much curb there. Revenues. Revenues for gas tax. So again, this funding source has been here, I don't know, ever since gas tax was probably created. Ron probably knows. Bernie's not here, so. What's that? I won't make references to the earth cooling. So, and how long it's been around. But essentially, the revenue source is really flat. 2018, the only reason why there's a spike here is because we brought a KDOT project in under budget and the money was refunded into the fund. That's the only reason why there's an uptick in 2018 here. Pretty much it's flat. In fact, it doesn't even keep up with inflation. if you were to do inflation at 1.5% per year, we're not at that same level. So the gas tax is basically a flat revenue source. Our sales tax obviously was passed in November of 2016 and didn't begin collecting until April of 17. So that's why you kind of see in 2017 less than 1.5 million. Last 2 years revenue-wise, 2018 just under 2.5, and then I don't remember if this one is. Yep, and this one was just over 2.5. And that's on the tax that's been passed by our community. Now remember, 5% of that revenue collected on the sales tax for street repair goes to Safe Routes to School. In terms of expenditures, this is expenditures each year in terms of contractor maintenance only. So you're gonna go, well, wait a minute, Rob, there's a lot of money missing that we're receiving. Well, the gas tax pays for KDOT grants. It helps provide a match to a lot of the improvements that when we get a grant for whether it's safety, geometric improvement, or whatever. It also pays for materials for street crews, and it also has and still does pays for a couple of salaries in our traffic division as well. So the gas tax isn't just used for construction contractors to repair pavement. It also does enhancements and it provides some dollars towards operations as well.
Rob, hold that thought a second.
Oh, yes, sir.
So, as far as the the state gas tax being flat, does that mean that the state's rating that money and just leaving what was there before, or are cars getting more efficient? People are only buying the same amount of gas as they were 10 years ago because even though there's more cars, they're more efficient, and thus the same amount of gallons of gas is staying the same.
Your second answer is
That one.
correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And it's actually a national gas tax.
Okay. It's not even a.
There are state add-ons that vary, but the feds really control the base, and they've not increased it in years.
I believe it's been over 20 years since they've ever touched the gas tax.
Okay.
But your second answer is correct.
Okay.
Is the efficiency of vehicles. Expenditures. So again, when we started off the program, I don't like to run programs in the red, so if you'll remember, we had just under 1.5 million that we collected in 2017, but in 2017 we wrote checks for just barely over $500,000. Again, that's not running the program in the red. All those dollars are carried over in each year. I will tell you, even though in 2019 there's still contracts that contractors are working on right now in the community and repairing streets. And again, we got to have that revenue. So that's the reason why you kind of see, ups and downs a little bit. But my goal is always to try and carry roughly 10% over each year. So if I have just over 2 million, I'm trying to carry a buffer of about $250,000 over into each year. That way I don't run the program into the red. And I have dollars for, emergency situations and scenarios. Commissioner Morris, this map, when I gave you the tour, you kind of asked, can I have a map of just the sales tax streets that have been repaired? Not what the city crews have done, not what the gas tax. So that's since the inception of the tax. These are the segments on a map of in the community where we have repaired streets. I've also just quickly verbalized it as well in text for you all. Sharing Brook, Greystone, Sunset Zoo area, Stag Hill area we're in now, Claflin west of K113 to Wreath, Gary Avenue, the Blue Hills subdivision, as well as the Northview area, several streets up in the Northview area. So, Commissioner, you had asked me for that. I hope that was the intent in short.
Yeah. Well, I know it takes a while to put things together when we ask, so I appreciate having, this is helpful.
And again, that is just the sales tax. Y'all be even busier map if I added the city crews and
Sure.
the gas tax. I can do that. but I was just trying to answer a question that was asked previously.
Great, thank you.
I verbally told you where we would be in the community for 2020. This happens to be a map. It has the aqua is where the city crews will be. The yellow is where contractor sales tax or special tax will be spent. And then the purple is the gas tax, so up on Kimball. So you can kind of see the various yellow segments. I provided you text earlier. If you have any questions, these are kind of the neighborhoods and roadway segments that we're targeting. Of course, I told Jeff and the city crews, if you get your list done, I got more for you. So hopefully we'll have that good weather. On to the Safe Routes to Schools program. So just backing up a little bit about history and the way KDOT's nomenclature is. So the very first phase one was a study of the entire community for all our different schools. In order to access construction dollars from the transportation alternatives or the federal KDOT program, you had to have a phase one done. So that's the reason why you kind of see phase 2A and phase 2B. Phase 2 is the construction dollars that are available. We have completed all the projects in phase 2A. We have awarded, and I say we have, KDOT has awarded, I believe they have a late start date of April for the phase 2B. So that would be all the different aqua projects or circles that are shown up here. And I'll just kind of read off the various locations. There's Dickens and Hudson, Claflin and Reef intersection, which I think, Mary, you may have gotten some complaints, or maybe it was Commissioner Dotson just before he left. Claflin and Reef, we had some citizens that were concerned. Again, some good improvements coming for that this year. Hobbs and Browning, South Manhattan, a sidewalk on South Manhattan. Up in Northview with two projects, Galloway and Charles, and then one at Northview School on Griffith Drive. So there's actually right there in front of the school, and the principal's aware of that, and so is Eric Reed as well. So those are where we're at on those projects. We did submit, and I think my next slide explains that, we did submit the next phase, the phase 2C. You all authorized us back in October of 2019 to submit those next rounds of projects. It was in a packet. We're anticipating KDOT making an announcement hopefully by the end of March on whether we'll get those awards or not. Again, here's kind of a list of what has been completed. Funded projects are in that 2B that you all have already authorized, and we've made payment to KDOT for. There's still more work to do. However, we're continuing to make good progress on the overall program. And hopefully we'll be awarded the 2C, and then we'll begin working on the 2D packet and so on and so forth, and we'll see what comes down. In terms of dollars spent, we have spent just roughly under $600,000. This is everything I mentioned before. The phase one didn't actually physically construct anything, but it gave us the plan that allowed us access to the construction dollars. We had to do the phase one. Otherwise, you don't even get to go to step 2. And this is everything that every penny that finance has spent. Again, if you remember, we're supposed to spend roughly 5% of revenues on the Safe Routes to School program. We're 2.5 years into the program. If you use an average of $2 million a year, that's roughly 100,000. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, but that's okay. Again, I want to continue to try and compete, leverage dollars, bring it back to the community. At the end, we just have to make sure that we don't go over that 5%. But that's why we're watching it closely. Yes, sir.
So is that are most of those 50-50 deals with KDOT?
A lot of times they're a max not to exceed. So like one of them, I think this one here was like, I think the total bid was like 396 or something. It was like a 200,000, anything over 200,000 the city had to pay.
Okay.
The last one was a little bit different. Was 500,000, not 80-20? 80-20 split. So KDOT's changed the rules a little bit. Again, it's not free money. We know that. I'm just trying to leverage it back to the community.
So, there's no real linkage between the safe routes to school and the sales tax, other than the sales tax is where we get the money for our match for the safe routes to school.
Correct.
And that's as a Johnny-come-lately, I wasn't paying attention when they started talking about this years ago, but the safe routes to school is a state KDOT program. And then we just need to come up with money for our part of the match for all these different projects.
And when we went out with the ballot question, Commissioner, specific language was entered into the ballot that 5% would be set aside to fund or support the Safe Routes to School program.
And that was part of the question, and Safe Routes to School has been around long enough that people knew about it, voters should have known about it at that time.
But there was, there's some great folks in community development, our bicycle and pedestrian advisory group, USD 383, Riley County Health Department, all sorts of great partners that help do surveys at each of the schools. We did site visits, site councils, not faculty meetings, what's the?
PTO.
Thank you. PTO met with, so that was a lot of that phase one. There's kind of the 3 E's. There's engineering, education, and enforcement. So, those components are part of the overall program. Some schools are doing better than others in terms of those components. But we've tried very hard on the engineering side to spread projects around. You can see we're trying to hit as much of the community as we possibly can. Does that help you, Commissioner?
Yes.
And with that,
I might just add that.
Go ahead, sir.
In addition to the safe routes to school dollars and our dedicated sales tax component, we have other funding sources like our general improvement fund. We usually budget about $50,000 to $100,000 a year in usually sidewalk infill. We also have some CDBG money that we usually target towards sidewalks that have to meet specific criteria for low-income areas. And then we've had some success in working with the ATA to be able to leverage some transit grants to build sidewalks to some of their stops. And that's become just more apparent as we've been trying to determine where some of those permanent stops might be.
yeah, Ron's absolutely right. Ann Smith has been very supportive of, if there's a missing sidewalk connection to a bus stop, they've helped fund, and we've designed some of those in-house, and there's some more coming here as well. So, challenges ahead. We got some full depth repairs on both the arterials and collectors that I mentioned. I'm always going to struggle balancing the work between major streets versus residential. There may be a few years where we're going to have to play on the residential streets, and folks may be upset that their certain route or commute to work is going to be a little bumpier until we can get back on it. The alleys is something that always concerned me. If that's a direction the commission wants, the next time we update and inventory all our streets, we can look at trying to get a pavement condition index for the alleys and so forth. You do have a policy in place for addressing alleys that are unpaved in the MFRO district. That's probably the only policy that you have in terms of creating benefit districts, if you so choose to force it. If we can't get the 51% majority to replace an alley. Again, there's a process for that. We did 2 previously, and Brian and I have some more because frankly, they're fully developed. All they are is apartments, and it's a maintenance nightmare for Jeff. And it's probably time for us to follow the process, see if we can get the 51%. If not, we'll bring the case before you, and you all can weigh the facts and make a decision. So, and of course, as always, you know, inflationary costs versus flat revenues. Again, that's always a concern. There's not a lot we can do about it. It's just something I try and keep an eye on. With that, I guess commissioners, I'll take questions on the data or the analysis, and then certainly any direction or guidance for the programs moving forward.
Thanks a lot, Rob. Questions for Rob or comments?
The traffic out at Northview School is getting really serious, and I just wondered what the plan is there, just because I haven't caught up with it.
So I'm not sure I quite know what you're getting at. Are
Yeah.
you talking about?
Well, you said it's on the Safe Routes to School list, and it's coming, but I just wondered what.
So are you talking about capacity improvements to Griffith in terms of widening the road, or are you
I
talking?
don't know. It's on the Safe Routes to School,
Correct.
so I just want to know what it is.
So there's,
Hold
so when you all approved,
It says crosswalk modification on Griffith, I guess, that's what you're,
correct. It's a design
Sure.
in terms of that crosswalk, in terms of limiting the amount of exposure that the pedestrian will have traveling north to south. It's constriction of some of the lanes. If you're looking, I mean, I can get the design, it was in the packet when you all approved it.
so how do you get a project on this Safe Routes to School list?
So the phase one was when the study was done and when all
Right.
the projects were identified.
Yeah, and that was 2-3 years ago.
That was several years
So
ago.
my question is, how do you get a project on it?
If you want to submit a new project, there's a capital improvements
Okay.
program that a citizen or a committee can submit. And then there's weighting criteria that we would go through and then evaluating.
It might take a
And
couple
whether
years.
it should move to the top, because there's already other projects already identified in the plan.
What if you don't know what the solution is? So you don't know what to ask?
So you don't know what to ask me, and you don't.
I don't know what to ask. I don't know what improvement to ask for, is the question. But I know that there's a problem, and the traffic is backing up on Griffith Drive, clear to Casement from the front of the school, and going around onto Casement. The parents are lining up clear back that far. And so I'm just asking how to bring something up.
So I would recommend to that individual or that citizen that's concerned about that, to bring it to your PTO
Okay.
and bring it up through those committees, that site committee and the principal, and let them debate. And then if they believe there's enough support for something that needs to be addressed, that's when we can enter and we can then talk about technical solutions on the engineering side.
Okay, I didn't know.
Does that make sense? I mean,
It's
that's how
fine.
every project's
That's
kind
how
of.
that's what I wondered, how do you get there? So if you go to the MPO and try to get it on their list, or if you come to you or submit a CIP, but if you don't, if the citizen doesn't know what the solution is, and you have to rely on the professionals to come up with the solution, then,
Oh, again,
Yeah.
start, I don't know, what
start-
the MPO is not in
start-
charge of the city.
no, I know. Start talking about it, that's what you're saying. At the school district level, you think?
I would certainly, I mean, a lot of the conversations where the identification of problems
Yeah.
often start at those site councils and those PTOs.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then come up through those discussions and,
Very good.
They often tell the principal.
yeah.
The first one who gets the
There's-
call is the principal.
yeah. And
And
there's,
it's usually during those drop-off and pickup periods, or when there's sporting events. And they back up at every school, but I understand what you're saying, too.
I hate to tell you this, the mayor's absolutely right.
No,
Every
I just
school.
needed to be, I didn't know where is the first touch point. Okay, thank you.
So I was gonna just chime in, the last one I recall that just sort of showed up was, we redid that crosswalk at Lee School. And that was a citizen request, and I don't know what the process was, but they recommended moving it, line of sight, whatever, and I don't know what fund paid for that, but you guys. you know,
STP, CBG, so.
Is that what it
Central
was?
Block Grant.
Yeah, but it fit into this, safe route, and the staff figured out how to get funding, and they addressed it, and it got moved, and it's been working great the past year, because I drive that all the time. It's much better. It's a great improvement, so.
Again, and Brian, correct me, I believe those comments and the origin of it came up through the principal. Yeah,
And I've gotten a lot of comments, she's talking about, they're backing up at all the schools. And I'm not so sure it's an issue with our roads or the safe routes. It's just everybody's driving their children to school, and there's a traffic jam. It's at Amanda Arnold. It's every school. And there's people concerned on that one Sunny Slope, I guess, where the new one's going in. I've forwarded that to you. They're concerned that, people are gonna be dropping off children and have to walk them in, and they're gonna create a massive traffic jam there. So it's basically an issue of curb cuts, and is there enough parking? And maybe it's more an RCPD issue of enforcing, don't be stopping out here on the streets where you're not supposed to.
We also, sorry.
Oh, I was going to chime in since, I mean, you're absolutely right. Dropping off is a problem at every school. But as somebody that was on the school board, and that need and that capacity isn't what you're addressing, that's what the school board addressed, and that's why they passed a bond issue, and we're at capacity at all these schools, and people are driving clear from over Green Valley to Northview. And so as a new school is built, as redistricting happens, which is none of our responsibilities, I think the pressure will be relieved. But if we look at this, how do we solve this problem with dropping off and pick up today? Well, that's why we voted on a bond issue, I think.
Well, the other piece to that is, enough people don't use the school bus. There's this convenience thing that a lot of people feel like they need to drop them off, but the school bus goes to, I think, 2 miles or a 2.5 mile radius. But still, if they're not using the paths provided for biking or for riding, a lot of parents drop them off because they miss the bus or the bus comes too early, whatever it is. It's a matter of convenience. But I do know at Ogden, we worked with our site council, and on our site council, we had the Ogden City Commissioner there because Ogden is such that they were driving through and we had new stop signs put in, and they would also go through where it says do not enter, they'll go in that way, and we had cops there all the time. But I think they go first to the principal or for PTO or site council, and then it comes to the city. And that's how we were able to even do this safe routes to school, because of all of the entities you had referenced.
Brian and I, a lot of times, again, this conversations start at the elementary school or the middle schools. They get vetted through those councils and those monthly meetings, and then we get asked to come and attend because they've kind of concise their problem statement, and then we do try and find what that, perhaps an engineering solution. But we also invite RCPD. They've attended a lot, so I want to talk positive about RCPD. It is 3 E's. It is education, engineering, and enforcement. Some schools the principals have changed their operations. One school separated the parent drop-off versus the bus zone, and it helped out immensely. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. But when they tried to put 5 pounds of flour in a 2-pound bag, it wasn't working on too much and 2 entrances. When they separated the functions and what the user groups were, it helped. And principals have that latitude. That's what those site councils are for, and so forth.
Yeah.
So.
And some of these schools are almost like middle schools, the elementary schools, the population stuff. So the redistricting will hopefully help out. But I'm glad that Commissioner Morris brought that up.
Yeah.
I got a other question.
Go ahead, sir.
So don't mean to spring this on you, but at this point, do you have any, you have the spreadsheet for how much we spend on cleaning or removing snow or ice? Is that anything you have? And I don't mean to put you on the spot for so far this year.
No,
Okay.
I do have, so I have not done my okay. So you're asking about the
How much-
cost for
yeah.
snow and
And
ice
I-
operations.
Right, for this year,
Yeah, I have each individual storm. I just haven't had time to assemble all the individual spreadsheets into my summary. If that's something the commission, I can prepare a memo for the city manager and get that to you all. In fact, I think Krista just sent me one the other day from the little event we had when we went out and did a little bit of treatment. But I can certainly assemble that for the 2019-2020.
we can wait and knock on wood and hope for later on that. I just didn't know if you happen to have it handy.
Not yet.
Because that's just valuable. People don't realize how much we do put in and how much it costs to clear off a road and all the costs associated with that. And anyway, it's important. But the last thing I had to ask was, I know you mentioned, this is great information. You mentioned the MPO is not part of, does not run the city.
Do not run the city.
But I do want to throw in a plug for them in the sense, as we go through these projects, what kind of is the process of finding ways to partner with them or bringing that to their attention to leverage any funding for, they sometimes have things for sidewalks or intersections or things that they can do like on Fremont, and I'm doing my due diligence since I am now on their committee, so I am biased.
So on the, one of the things that's kind of a fallacy is that the MPO does not receive construction dollars. In order for us to spend state and federal construction dollars, we have to list our projects in the STIP, or the Transportation Improvement Plan. Do we work with Stephanie and Jared and go after grants of sources that Brian and I don't necessarily normally work with? Absolutely. And Stephanie's done a great job, and so has Jared. We have a very good partnership, but they do not get a large multi-million-dollar allocation. That's always been a fallacy ever since that organization was created, that there were just going to be millions of dollars sitting there, and all the Manhattan has to do is write on a Post-it note and throw it in the hat and they'll get their dollars. That's not true. We compete every time against Lawrence, Kansas City, Hutchinson, Salina. I compete against everyone for those Safe Routes to Schools dollars. I get that they're not free dollars. I've never agreed with that, but I don't like letting Lawrence win. That's why I've tried to be very aggressive ever since I came here. I used to sit on the committees at KDOT that selected projects. So I understand people have changed, criteria's changed a little bit, but at the end of the day, you have to solve problems and have positive cost to benefit ratios. In terms of the MPO, yes, we work with Stephanie and Jared quite a bit to make sure that all funds, projects are listed, we're meeting the law, but at the same time, they've helped us go after and search other funding sources. So they're a great partner. So again, it's nothing, I just want to be real clear. The MPO doesn't have this magical pots of money that are raining down. It just doesn't exist.
On that, so if it turns out we don't have any more snowstorms and we don't have to spend any more money on salting and roading and spraying stuff, does that potentially free up some money for more of something else, or does that just get lost in the budget?
Okay, so answer your question. Salt, brine, sand. No, we don't use much sand anymore. Those dollars are programmed to our two locations: general fund and the gas tax. I spend the general fund first. Once those line items are expended, then I spend out of the gas tax. Gas tax, whatever I don't spend out of there, rolls over into the next year. General fund all goes back into overall cash reserves. Does that make sense? So that goes into your cash balance for the next year. Trying to think how else. Labor, overtime hours, all of that is general fund. That's all Those employees, the fuel, all that's out of the general fund. So if you save on snow and ice operations, then in theory, that would carry over. Okay?
I'd just like to reiterate my thinking on alleys. And I know that we have a process for certain alleys that,
Yep.
but I tend to object to the large apartment complexes coming in, and then the alley has to be fixed because they came, but they do not want to participate in any way in the construction or costs associated with it. And just like we do, I think there's room for us to develop a policy so that that doesn't just fall on the community at large. We've got 16 alleys or 15 left. That's a big cost. And so there's no other cost. They don't have to pave the streets or do the sewer. We end up doing the sewers for all through the town because of the volume that the apartment complexes and even the university are tending to generating. And so I just think there's a way for us to try to get some resources to pay for that. And I think we should pursue that.
Okay, just, I guess to recap on that, Commissioner, the current policy and the practice has been 100% benefit district to adjacent property owners. The only thing that the city at large is paid for is some storm sewer upgrades. And as you know, in the ward districts, there's 75 million in deficiencies on stormwater. So are you objecting that we continue to bring benefit districts that are 100%?
No, I want benefit districts to pay for it.
Okay, I just want to be clear.
I
So
just
there is-
don't want the community at large to have to foot the bill when there's a big development that comes in. I just want them to have to pay a fair portion also. So, and it's not just in one area. I just think that's a good way to look at it across the city.
You're correct. Right now, the policy is kind of written for the multifamily overlay district. So if we want to expand that, that's something we can
Yeah.
certainly visit with management. And-
I just wanted to go on record. I say that about twice a year. Okay.
Yeah, I want to say I appreciate the briefing. I think, if people are concerned out there about, is that sales tax money being wisely spent, I think you presented a very good case that it's being wisely spent, and it's going on the roads. And I think, you've done a great job, you and your staff, on that pavement, index, your PCI, because it puts in perspective where it is. But it also illustrates that, you're basically got $4 million. You can throw at this every year, and you're only going to get $4 million worth, but there may always be $5 million worth of things that need to be constructed. And I think, people always complain about potholes in the roads, and I think, with the resources we have and the people you've committed to it, I just don't have the impression it can be done any better. So I really appreciate, what you put here. I think the numbers are there. It's pretty clear. People can go to the city website. I think you've got a link there, and you can see which projects are coming up. So, anybody has a question, I've tried to send that to different people so that they can just punch on there, and you got a little map, and it blows it up, and you can see all those things. And we've got the reported app, and I think your staff's done a great job, responding. A number of people have sent me things, and you've given them, the right answers. We've got a lot of engineers out there that know how to fill potholes better and things like that send us notes. But I think you've given them good examples, so I'm impressed. I think we'll continue doing this, and if we can somehow or other leverage more money, we've got places to spend it. That's pretty clear. But we're getting a good return on that $4 million, the contracts, the difference between, asphalt, concrete, and then what the city crews do. So I appreciate that effort.
Thank you, Rob. I think, again, lots of great information. We do get a lot of emails and such. So a couple of questions for you. When, you had the greater than 70 and less than 70. So when you say less than 70 and you have to go fix those, what is the range you're looking at? Are you looking at anything, not just 69? So you're looking at 50, 30, where are we at as far as the below, less than 70 pieces are concerned?
So,
The average, I guess.
so depending on the pavement type, so let's just pick on asphalt a little bit. You know, the segment could be anywhere between, you know, maybe a 60 and maybe even a 75, maybe even a high 70, where the PCI is of asphalt. And the recommendation might be to do a mill and overlay, just a 2 or inch and a half mill and overlay. That's a lot cheaper cost in that range. If the base is bad, you know that quickly, 60, 65 and below, we may have to do a full depth repair. Again, it all depends on asphalt. Is it into the base? And are we have to go tear it all the way down to the very bottom and start over? That's my argument for 17th, Sunset, and 11th. We did that with Kimball last year. If I can stay, on asphalt with just mill and overlays, my cost of repairing square yards is a lot cheaper if I get to things earlier. That's my concern with like the residential asphalt. If I keep waiting, and I'll pick on Butterfield, if I keep waiting too much longer on Butterfield, I'm gonna get myself in trouble, because then it is gonna begin to deteriorate the base. And then my cost per square yard really goes up because I'm going all the way to the bottom. On concrete, there are some streets, I would say that we sometimes will do full panel. On concrete, we'll do the full depth repair. We have skipped segments, but we at least try to repair from the curb line to the center line now on concrete. So the range may be even a little bit more into the 70s if there's still some really bad. Remember, again, it's a PCI average for the entire segment,
Right.
from a node to another node. And if there's, if I'm in an area and there's 4 or 5 really bad panels in one area, the rest of the street's really good, well, maybe the rest of the street between those nodes we'll leave alone, or we'll just do 1 or 2, but we might do a whole lot from curb to curb. If that makes any sense. So I don't know if I answer your question
Yeah,
very
I
well.
was just wondering, like, if you said below 70, like, are they all near close to 70? Or are they like really bad?
Oh,
Like,
some of them.
that's the percentage I was looking at, like, how many are like really, really bad?
You
is
go
what
look
I was
at.
wondering. Because I don't travel like on all of those roads where you do, but we have a lot of, when we have a lot of construction and such going on, there's a lot of heavy trucks that go through some of those smaller areas that we don't recognize as much.
Kings Road, I think, is in the 40s. There's got a
That's what
couple.
I'm asking.
They got a couple of segments that are in the 40s. Wyndham Heights is a little bit all over the board. They've got some segments in the 50s, some segments in the 70s, some in the 60s. Claflin. Ron and I had a debate on Claflin because Ron didn't.
Yeah. I
Ron's
was
like, oh, that's not that bad, Rob. You don't need to get out there. And then he drove it. And he goes, okay, you're not completely crazy. Yes, there's some good segments, but there were some segments that were in the 30. I didn't show him the PCI map until after he drove it. And then, again,
That makes a difference. That range, like you said, 30 sounds like really terrible to me. And that's what I'm saying. Like, if it's just borderline 70, it was like, like you said, like a grade. It's like, I'm kind of there. But if it's 30, 40, 50, you feel like there's a sense of urgency in getting that done.
and again, when I'm in a neighborhood, this kind of goes back to the gentleman that chewed out Brian a couple summers ago. Well, why are you fixing that? It's not that bad. Well, I'm trying to address this entire neighborhood because I don't want to come back. There's additional mobilization that we pay. There's just inefficiencies. So we're trying the best we can to address an entire neighborhood all at once. We're not perfect.
And I think that's actually the Claflin's a great example of an asphalt project where you have all kinds of segments, but it's so inefficient to just say, well, we're just going to go do this 200-foot 30 section because everything else is 55 and 60. And it's going to cost you more mobilization to go do that versus if you just do all of it.
And traffic control.
And traffic control. So
Remember,
it's-
especially on like Claflin, that's a collector. We don't just throw some cones up and hope we don't get in trouble if there's a crash. We've got to put those cones up, tapers, slide the through traffic over at the right rate, separate them, give room for the crews, and all that happy stuff that we're required to do.
Yeah, I think that's a good explanation, because I received emails as well where they say, the city keeps fixing the same things that are already good, I don't know why they keep doing that. So that explains, like, you just don't want to go in there and do that one thing. And it's a visual thing for a lot of people, because they see cones in some of those areas so many times. So my next question, Mark brought up about the gas tax and efficiencies, and how, we're collecting less revenue because the cars are more efficient, and the sales tax, the gas tax has not increased in the past 20 years, and there may be more electric cars also coming into our communities, and fewer people are buying cars. So what is the solution then to keep going forward? I mean, we have something for now, but how do we address this? Do we start looking at different types of revenue, or I don't know, if they're going to get more and more efficient. Cars are just going to getting better and better, and with the emissions and everything else that's being discussed now, they're going to go towards more electric cars. And I don't know if there's incentive for electric cars, but that's the direction it's going to be going. So where do you foresee us collecting revenue for this? And I heard conversations about electric cars and collecting money at some point,
So I'll take a first stab at that, and that's, one of the things we've heard for the past decade is Congress and our state legislatures providing more infrastructure money. It's on the top list of every major city and minor city in America, and it just hasn't happened. So that forced us, in my opinion, to do our own 2/10 sales tax, because the money wasn't coming. But our problems are just getting worse. And so, to me, that's a Band-Aid approach, because there's real needs out there that are only going to get more and more expensive. And so some states have gone to the wheel tax as opposed to the gas tax, and it's just going to take some effort, but obviously there's a lot of different entities that have a lot of lobbying power to keep things in certain ways.
what is the wheel tax?
A wheel tax is so if an electric car or a gas-powered car pays the same. It's based on your mileage, and those states that have it report the amount of mileage. Look at all the delivery trucks, that are traveling. There's, and a lot of them, some of those are electric, some of them are gas. So look at our trash trucks. We've got Wichita, as an example, has broken up their city based on the number of trash companies they have, and assigned segments of the city to each company based on the volume that they have today, instead of everybody taking a trash truck into the same neighborhood 5 different days of the week. So there's different things that we can do to help reduce that impact, but at the end of the day, it's going to take a lot more dollars to be able to even make a dent in sustaining that PCI at 70, much less improving it.
So maybe that is something we need to start discussing, is the wheel tax. So I don't know what that would look like, but definitely, even if they're electric cars, they're still cars. They won't be using gas, but we'll still need the infrastructure. So I'm thinking long range, what we should be advocating for more often. The sales tax, like you said, is a Band-Aid for now, but there are so many more cars that are giving better mileage for each of those gas, and it hasn't increased in 20 years either. So people are going to continue even when we do all of our projects, whether it's the North Campus Corridor, Aggieville, whatever it is, we'll have massive trucks, construction crew in our town. So I want to make sure how to address that in the long term. But overall, I think one of the best things our community has done is have a vote of confidence in Public Works and approve the sales tax for street maintenance. And I think it speaks well for our community members that have approved it, and to see updates like this. And it's easily accessible on our website, and anybody can call any one of our city offices and also get more information, and also check out where their street is and how that's being maintained, or if it's on the list, or what they need to do to get it on the list, or have somebody from our crew come and take a look at it. But I think we're fortunate to have a mild winter, so that there's more warm weather for crews to do their job in other segments of our community, and hopefully it'll stay like that. We usually have one big blast at the end of March or early April, and hopefully that won't happen, but typically that's how it's been. But I think this is very clear about the several types of maps and graphics you've shown have indicated progress we're making with the sales tax revenue money. So thank you for that. Other questions for Rob?
One final comment, Commissioner Estabrook brought up the whole snow and ice operations. So one thing that Jeff and our head fleet supervisor, Dan, who's sitting over there as well, have taken my challenge I gave him a number of years ago, which is how can we still effectively provide a level of service in terms of what the road looks like after snow or ice, and reduce the amount of salt that we're applying. And Dan and Jeff have done a very good job in terms of going to conferences, picking up different controllers, speccing better controls for operators, training our operators, all to try and reduce that amount of salt that's applied for each snow or ice event. It's not a perfect science. We have old equipment, but as we replace equipment that we're very appreciative that you all approve each year, we try and do our research to make sure we're getting things that are more flexible, that allow those operators to make adjustments based on pavement temp and the amount of precipitation and the type of precipitation. Brian and I have long believed, Brian's changed the mix design, especially on our concrete, so that our concrete is not as susceptible to salt water. That's what gets in the pores and freezes and expands and destroys those joints and so on and so forth. So it's not, yes, data's all nice. There's some hard work in the field. You know, I can't remember if Commissioner Hassel, if I showed you those spreadsheets on the snow and ice, but I know Commissioner Estabrook had asked, and you know, we are trying to, you know, reduce the amount of materials that we're using for each event. But it's a balancing act because you also all get complaints when it's not dry enough or not or too slippery, I guess. So anyway.
It does have impact on automobiles as well. And I mean, chemicals have a different impact on automobiles themselves and the drive and our water systems, stormwater systems and such. So, I mean, I'm glad we have professionally trained staff continuing to do this.
I'll just say real quick that I had been coming in thinking, man, we could just not plow or do these things and we could save some money. And then not shortly after I had visited with you and saw the spreadsheets and kind of looked and saw what that cost is, and it is a big number. I also had to go to the hospital at 2 a.m. to pick up a family friend in the middle of one of those events that we had this year, and was very thankful for the crew and the road and everything that had been done and treated in the middle of the night for us to get there safely and get back and pick that person up. So I just want to say thanks, and also that personal anecdote, but also thanks to Jeff and all the staff and all the people that do those 20,000 plus potholes. That you might have the most thankless job. You don't only get blamed for those, you get blamed for the school traffic too. So sorry about that.
And they can still go to the app. There's still the app, Fix-It app. I forgot what it's called. Reported app.
Yeah, the Reported app, as those requests come in, again, crews will, you know, assemble those complaints in a geographical area, and then a crew will try and go out and address them all at once. Obviously, arterials and collectors get a little more attention than the residential, but they do when they get a concentration or anything like that. They do try and go out, again, trying to be efficient time-wise and not just scattered all over the place. Try and hit one area at a time. I think the city's divided up into five different segments. So,
Okay. I thought it was 4.
just like our spring cleanup maps, the city's split up into 5 different
Very
areas, then assigned and
Yeah. No,
weekly tasks.
really, really good work and really good report, and thank you. We appreciate the update. With that, we are adjourned.